So go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, this represents the affidavits of the witnesses that we didn't have the time to call.
Yeah, make sure that button's
I'm
pushed.
sorry.
Thanks. Go ahead.
This represents the affidavits of the people that we didn't get a chance to call. There are hundreds of them, and they specifically allege similar acts of fraud, very similar to the witnesses that you heard. I find it puzzling that there seems to be such confusion about it. Maybe because of my background as a prosecutor, it's pretty obvious to me what happened here. The Democratic leader in Pittsburgh, in Pennsylvania, or in Philadelphia, or in Detroit, or in Las Vegas, or in Phoenix, or in Milwaukee, or in Minneapolis, or in Atlanta, didn't wake up on election morning when all those mail ballots were going to come in and decide we're going to shut out all the Republican poll watchers, or as many as we can. I mean, we've been counting absentee ballots forever. I did it myself when I was a young lawyer. Republican sits on one side, Democrat sits on the other side. We don't have any problem with it. This was uniform shutting out of as many Republicans as possible. In Pennsylvania, 890,000 ballots were cast secretly, with no Republican getting a chance to take a look at the ballot. And in Pennsylvania, there are 600,000 more votes counted, mail votes counted, than mail ballots they can find. This is a swindle. It's a con job. It's a theft of an election. And it was carried out by the same method in the city of Detroit. And with all due respect to Detroit, several analyses of corrupt cities, my city, New York, comes ahead of Detroit. So I'm not saying this with any pride, but it happens to be one of the most corrupt cities in the United States. On any measure, I just checked online here, it comes in 4th, 5th, 3rd, 7th, 8th. Several times New York comes in ahead. So I wonder why the confusion about what happened. They stole the election. Not the first one they stole, not the last one they're going to steal unless you do something about it. But you do something real, not, let's see how we're going to fix it. You've been fixing it for years, and it hasn't gotten fixed. They've been stealing elections for years. And this time, they got a chance to steal it really big because of the ridiculous mail ballot that was created. Back in 1960, the mayor of Chicago, the most corrupt city in America, by the way, just in case, on all the lists, by far, we can all feel better. Chicago's the most corrupt. He helped to steal the 1960 election by holding back the ballots in Chicago so the Republican ballots would come in, and then along with a gentleman named Sam Giancana, they got the ballots they needed to elect their candidate. Last year, 2 years ago in Florida, the same thing happened in Palm Beach and Broward County. It was a 2-point election, Senate, governor. Palm Beach County took 2.5 weeks to report. And finally it ended when they caught a truck like the one coming from Bayport, New York to Philadelphia. They caught a truck in Jacksonville headed to Palm Beach with 100,000 ballots that pretended to be Palm Beach ballots, but they were done up in Jacksonville. And then they had to end the election, and they prosecuted the people in Palm Beach. And remember, this year, we had no problem in Florida. I mean, you were counting for an eternity. Florida was over with that night because the governor had the courage to straighten it out. He had the courage to prosecute the people who committed the fraud. You don't end fraud by prospective measures to deal with fraud. You know how you end fraud? You put criminals in jail. That's how you end fraud. You have the courage. You have the courage to say that certification that was done by your state is a complete phony. It's a false statement made to the United States government. Those are prosecutable, by the way. That's not the vote by any means in Michigan. That's not the vote in Michigan. I don't know what the vote in Michigan is, but it's at least 300,000 or 400,000 votes off from what the real vote in Michigan is. And you heard the anger and the upset of your citizens. They seem to have more passion about it than you do. They figured out what happens because they live on the street. They know what happens in Detroit. Don't scratch your head about what happens in Detroit. They steal elections in Detroit.
Representative, you'll have an
And
opportunity
they steal
to
elections
ask a
in New
question.
York, and they steal elections in Boston, and they steal elections in Philadelphia. And the Democrats were smart enough to pick 10 corrupt cities to play their game out. 10 cities in which they could get away with it. 10 cities in which they could go into court and find a hack judge that will decide anything they want. So, I mean, we can live in this strange world all we want, but we're getting at the point where our freedoms are beginning to be eroded. Our right of free speech has been eroded substantially by the censorship imposed by big tech, big media, big corporations, and the Democrat Party. Our right of freedom of religion, with the ridiculous dictatorial way in which the COVID regulations are imposed on us, like they like to be dictators, these Democrat governors, they're taking away our right of the freedom of religion. Those are basically the two reasons we founded this country. Oh, by the way, there was a third, the right to freely and honestly elect our government. And they're taking that away from us too. It should not go without notice. And you should spend time taking a look at Pennsylvania, look at Philadelphia, look at Pittsburgh, look at how eerily similar it is to what these people testified to. Read the rest of these and see that there are hundreds of people that back them up. That election center in Detroit was a disgrace. You should be ashamed of it as citizens of Michigan. I would be ashamed of it if it was in New York, and it could easily be in New York. And I would do everything in my power to make sure it never happened again. And I would never certify an election or have my name associated with anything that was false. Now, it is your responsibility to do that. Not the governor, not the Secretary of State. You were given that responsibility by our founding fathers. They decided who would be the final arbiter, who should overlook a presidential election. And in Article 2, Section 1, Clause 2, the power is given to you. In the McPherson case in 1892, the United States Supreme Court made clear that you can take that power back any time you want to. Yes. Anytime. You can take it back tonight. You can take it back the day before the electors go down to Washington. You can take it back any time you want. And in case you think it's old law, it was reiterated in Bush v. Gore. You have the right to take it back. You are the final arbiter of how honest or not your election is in your state. And it's your responsibility to stand up to that. And all I can tell you is, we let them get away with this. I don't know what happens after this. This was a concerted plan to fix this election. There's no way that Donald Trump was ahead by 800,000 votes going to bed at night, that he was ahead here by 300,000 votes, that he was ahead in Wisconsin by 400,000 votes, that he was ahead in every state, that over a 4 or 5 day period with this ridiculously corrupt system of counting, they turned around with ballots coming in the back door, ballots being driven down from New York. There's no way that this wasn't stolen. And what it takes is courage. Courage. Not to be afraid of what's happened to these poor people. They've got guts to stand up to what the Democrats do to them. And it's not just the wild and crazy left-wing Democrats who do it. They do it as a way of bullying us. You can see their behavior in this hearing. I can see the difference in behavior between two sides. Maybe sometimes we're too nice. Maybe sometimes we're too decent. Or maybe we shouldn't change. But one thing we should have is we have the ability to defend ourselves and not let our people get kicked around the way those Republicans were kicked around. They wouldn't let it happen, and we shouldn't let it happen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.